No apologies. And we're all nicely socially distanced. Because I did note that somebody complained we weren't socially distanced enough the other day at a workshop.
Oh, yes, yes. We're all in the same family bubble, aren't we?
Oh, just about.
After yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess register that Nelson Pine is interested commercially in relation to the solar issue, but whether or not, I don't think that's necessarily conflict. It's actually complementary, probably.
No. Nobody requested. That's a big thing. Okay. Right. Confirmation of the minutes of the 17th of September.
Yep. Just an error I see down for attendance, and I was in attendance.
That's right.
Because I see I'd also seconded one of your several of the items.
So if we can fix that error. And I think I noted at the end of one of the reports that we had put in that we had an iwi representative on the board. That position is vacant, so that was on the end at the end as well. So we need to I've spoken to the staff to amend that as well. So with those two minor amendments, would someone like to move? Councillor Tufnell, seconded Councillor Skinner. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right. I don't have a chairperson's report in public, but I do have a comment to make when we're in confidential later about a simple matter. But we'll do it in confidential. Right. Next, we've got the manager's report. Nathan, over to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, operations at Bell Island are going well. We've had quite a lot of activities going on. The wastewater treatment plant has met all of its consent requirements, with the exception during August, I believe it was, that the amount of rainfall that we had coming into in the region meant that we were getting more into the plant for a prolonged period than we could discharge, and we ended up having to ask Tasman District Council for a dispensation to discharge for longer, to slightly in excess of our consented value. So I suspect that that's something that will happen in the future as growth goes on. Volumetric constraints will be something that will continue to be an issue. However, once we get the ponds desludged, we'll be able to run our ponds at slightly lower level to give us more storage. So it'll hopefully counteract that to some extent. Overall, there was essentially two significant issues that, in terms of safety, that we are investigating, both in relation to striking 11 kV cables. They both happened in the upgrade of the pipe work through the Turners and Growers site and around the Saxons Road pump station. The investigations found that our contractors followed due process, that they requested cable locates and the likes from Delta, the independent party, and that the cables that they knew about were located, but that there was other cables that weren't shown on their GIS system that were not identified. And one of the differences that we've put in place since that event, or those events, is that from now on, under all circumstances, when we're doing excavations, we will actually scan with a cable location tool and a GPR system all of the areas that we're going to dig. It appears that that actually wasn't undertaken when these excavations were going on. So it was from our perspective, really, really disappointing. In my career, 25 years, I've never had a cable strike like that before, and to have two of them on one project is pretty significant. The key aspect here is that it's an old industrial site, that some had some private high voltage cables around it, and some of that wasn't known about, and there was the linkage between the GIS systems for Network Tasman wasn't there. So anyway, that's quite a disappointment from our perspective. I don't know whether you have any comments on the investigations.
Thank you, Nathan. Through the chair. Yeah, at this stage, we're still waiting to get a full report out of Network Tasman and Delta. It would appear that their as-builts really were not particularly accurate. And we do have some concerns about possibly the information we're getting back out of their reports. Like I said, we're only seeing the drafts to date, so we should get the complete reports in the next couple of days. Unfortunately, we don't have any contractual relationship with either Delta or Network Tasman. As it's an 11 kV cable, we don't actually pay them to do any of the work. For that and fibre, they provide that free of charge. So we can't make them comply with any contractual obligations. So at the moment, we're just using relationships to try and get a bit more information out of them and understand what they intend to do from their side of things to try and help mitigate this risk in the future. As Mr. Clark pointed out, yes, we are instigating ground penetrating radar as standard for any of our excavations going forward, irrespective of what the service plans might tell us is or isn't in that environment. In terms of cost, it's not a major issue for us. We don't generally do a lot of excavation. It's with the rising rate duplication at the moment that we're doing a larger amount of excavation work, but it's a long and narrow alignment anyway.
All right. I know there's some questions, so Councillor McGee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just so I'm clear, so this was on the Turners and Growers site to the north of the the Nayland Road or Saxon Road site?
Yeah, through the chair, it is correct. Between Sexton Pump Station and where the new pipeline turns to connect to the old line and go underneath State Highway 6, so running along the edge of Turners and Growers. So the two strikes, one was within the Turners and Growers compound, which was a cable that they didn't know was there. The second strike was adjacent to the Network Tasman transformer at the Saxon Pump Station. Their plans showed one cable on the southern side of the transformer and nothing on the northern side of the transformer. They even completed a cable locator on the northern side of the transformer and were unable to find that 11 kV cable running away from the transformer there.
So, well, the question is, you reckon there's no liability attracts to the NRSBU?
No, that's correct. Network Tasman has basically confirmed that NRSBU and our contractors have done everything correctly, that their poor as-built records and the actual cable locate itself were realistically the cause of the strike.
Yeah, I read this and I was actually, really it's quite concerning. 11 kilowatt, can do a lot of damage. It just strikes me that, boom, boom. There was one strike and which would have thought would have alerted, well, there's a problem here somewhere, there's, not here. Why wasn't a sort of more thorough search done? Because less than a month later, there's a second strike.
Yeah.
And the vicinity with exactly the same situation where...
That is our response to us. So there were some procedures changed between the first incident and the second incident, in that the contractor actually engaged a cable locate for the second one. The cable locate did not detect this cable. One of the other things that we discovered was that we weren't actually advised of the first incident through the internal reporting system until the second one had occurred. That, however, is due to the way the jobs were logged. They weren't flagged through to regional services. They went through capital projects. So the health and safety team were aware of them within NCC, but that wasn't brought to our attention because it's gone through the incorrect side of the health and safety database, I suppose.
Yeah. My head's shaking actually. Okay.
Councillor Tufnell, and then I've got Quite sure. Mr.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just following on from that, I mean, I've actually had experience driving a digger myself and actually hitting a power cable, and it's not a lot of fun. But I don't quite understand. And I think we do, and obviously you've had some discussion with Network as to why we don't have some sort of sweeping locating methodology rather than on the cables that are there. I guess going forward, we were fortunate because in this day and age when power cables are put in, there are tapes up above the cables, which gives you a bit of a degree of protection. But my word, I think once we're working in an older area, we have to be extremely careful.
Through the chair, yeah, that practice of sweeping for cables. In this instance, the second 11 kV strike, it was done not how we would have liked it to have been done, however. So the cable locator from Delta has come out and basically done a sweep along the entire northern side of the transformer and was unable to locate the 11 kV cable coming out of the transformer. So he has advised the staff on site because our work site was 5 metres away from the transformer. He's completed a 10 metre sweep along the side of the transformer and advised the contractors on site that there were no cables located. So they were reasonably confident based on the information that was provided that the area they were working on, which was 8 metres adjacent from the transformer, was free of cables. The Network Tasman report has indicated that they have had some issues possibly with the locator and the 11 kV cable. They're generating some interference through the fence around the site. They've also made a comment in there which I've just become aware of yesterday afternoon, that they didn't want to go into the bottom of a drainage ditch that was there to scan the bottom of the drainage ditch for health and safety reasons. So that's a little bit of an interesting assessment on their behalf, that someone climbing down into a less than a metre deep ditch is a greater health and safety risk than hitting an 11 kV power cable. So yeah, we are now taking the action of completing the ground penetrating radar, as well as we're going to insist that the contractors get the locators to do a cable avoidance tool sweep of our excavation alignment, because we want to just put that extra level of precaution in place.
Thank you. Mr. Shura.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Brad, you mentioned there's no contractual obligation on Network Tasman's part, but it strikes me that this is, sorry, pardon the pun there, but this is a significant health and safety risk. And if you're not happy with the way their methodology or how they do it, is this something that, and it has happened twice because their methodology has failed, is it not something that WorkSafe should be brought into, or?
I'm not necessarily sure I can answer that. I don't think either of the incidents met the threshold for reporting to WorkSafe. So it was put through and I checked myself, it was put through that they've got an online system for determining, because they were no harm, no damage incidents. There was no explosion. It didn't require reporting through, which again, I don't set those rules. I may or may not necessarily agree with it. Because we have no control over the methodology that the cable locators themselves actually choose to implement, the ground penetrating radar is our way of engaging someone separate from the service providers that are determined by the network owners, to actually provide some additional level of security to our operations.
Yeah, I was just wondering from the point of view that, this is the consequences could have been a death quite easily in these circumstances. And yeah, the likelihood is probably relatively low, but I suggest even the likelihood might not be that low in terms of the methodology. And that's why it's not worthwhile having something on record to WorkSafe that you have concerns, even though it doesn't trigger it, that you raise it as a concern.
We may elect to do that once we get the investigation, the complete investigation back from all parties, and that's fine.
From my perspective, it does raise a larger issue for, Nelson and City, Tasman District in particular. You're doing a lot of these types of activities, and whether if the same methodology is being used for other locations or other sites, then obviously it adds a risk profile that, might need to be dealt with. Well, we will, NRSVU will take our actions for ourselves, but obviously that it's a learning experience for others as well.
Yeah, through the chair, just to clarify, we are communicating with NCC's health and safety leadership about this as well. Malcolm Hughes, who's the health and safety advisor, has taken a keen interest in it because he recognises it as a regional risk, primarily generated from the poor condition or possible poor condition of some of the as-built records of old cables.
Yeah, I think Mr. Levertis, having been involved in the project in Queen Street, stuff is never necessarily where you think it is when it's been there for 50 or 80 years. And I know this site was occupied in the 50s, and probably before. Mr. Levertis?
So through the chair, Nathan and I have had several discussions about this, and one of the things that I've put in place is I've had a chat to Lois to ensure that there is that we've covered our bases in terms of how we deal with it on NCC jobs. And I've also asked her to formally write to the utility operators, asking them to review their processes and then to come back to us. And it may be as simple as doing I can't remember what I discussed with Nathan, but a 5-meter scan on either side of where you actually need to work, not just 1 or 2 meters either side of where you think the cable is. So if you do 5 meters either side of a trench or something that's 4 meters wide, you've got a wide coverage. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. So the good thing is that it's been dealt with appropriately now, and going forward, we don't want any other occurrences. So back to you, Nathan.
Yeah, the good news piece of the story about the Turners and Growers site is that piece of pipe is complete and it's been tested. And it's all good. So one of our 11 sections of pipe that we're doing for the upgrade of from Beach Road through to Bell Island is now complete. We've got preliminary design for the section essentially from Bunnings down to Saxons Road. So we're hoping to go to the market soon for that piece. Preliminary design from Heslops through to Bunnings along Elm Street and Kotua Place. So we're hoping to get consents and the likes in place for that because there's contaminated soil and the likes in that zone soon. And that will go hopefully to market in the new year. And, so we are proceeding quite, well with that pipeline upgrade. We've also confirmed that the old AC pipe was under the highway still intact, which allows us to do the sleeving of that section under the highway, which is another, key factor in the progress. So on that overarching program, things are moving well, and we are still aiming for the June 23 completion date for the whole program. If we at the moment, so that's good. Generators for the regional pipeline in Nelson. They've been painted with an additional protective coating, and the enabling works are being put in place at the present time. So that's another good news story. But overall, there's a bunch of stuff going on, and quite other than that, the safety incident with the Turners and Growers site, I'm pretty happy with where we are. So open to questions about anything else.
We'll start with Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. Just 2 questions. One on paragraph 5.5 of your report, the lightning strike. What was the issue there?
So the issue that we have at NRSVU is that all of our pump stations basically take their data and send it to Nelson City, and then it comes back out to Bell Island, and then for our system, and then the alarm systems are currently generated at Nelson City. So when there's a failure of the alarm system at Nelson City, which has happened on a number of occasions, then we don't get advised of that issue. So the system has some backstops. The generators kick into place if the power goes out and they start running, but you don't know that they're running. So we're basically left with the situation where, and in the past we were, a few minutes essentially away from the generator running out of fuel before the actual, someone identified that issue was there. So there is an issue in the system with its resilience. And so what we're proposing to do is to essentially pick up the data from the pump stations and direct that data to Bell Island first to have that, because we've got backup power supplies and the likes there, and then take the data from Bell Island over to NCC rather than relying on that system. They'll have a link between the two systems so that if one of them's not talking to the other, it'll generate an alarm from that. So there's a backup in that alarm arrangement. So that's essentially the basis of that issue.
All right, okay. Another question, 9.1 in your report. I think 9.1. No. The loss of activity engineer.
Right, yep.
And a reference you've got in 10.1 of your report. It's just about the workload. I'm just wondering the workload that's applying it onto the NRS view. Big two, we're taking one third out, and I'm just
the workload. There's
a bit of feedback about how you and Brad and Morgana are going to cope with what we're expecting of you.
We're struggling. I mean, there are a lot going on. Our processes at the present time are to try and diversify the number of contracting organisations that we've got supporting us at both at the consulting level and at the contracting level. It's complicated even further by the fact that the labour market and the contracting market is all very constrained at the present time too. And obviously we're trying to negotiate with the new employer for the acting activity engineer to see if we can get her back on secondment for a big portion of our time. And so we're hopeful that we'll get some of that time back even after that change. So
Well, thanks for that, Nathan. I suppose this is a pretty frank conversation, but is the NRS view at risk of the capacity that we're asking of the employees to deliver some of the outcomes we're expecting, and the capacity to deliver what we're asking? Yes, no, we're aware of that.
We are constrained. I've said that before. I'll continue to say it. We are prioritising what things that we do. There's some things that have been left that we sort of consider not to be highest priority. We have, over the last year, let ourselves down a bit, is that there's been a couple of gaps that we haven't known about or haven't transferred over, not so much in NRSBU, but in NTRLBU, the other business unit we run, in one particular monitoring report for a resource consent, which is unfortunate. So we've got that under control now. But the benefit of the new operations and maintenance contract that we've put in place with NELMAC is that this target outturn cost arrangement allows us to push more of our activities across to that contractor as well. So we're hoping that they'll step forward and give us some additional capacity there. And just in that collaborative arrangement is beneficial for that. But we are still going to be under strain.
Yeah. Appreciate the reply. Thank you.
Other questions around the table?
So through the chair, I'd like to make the point with regards capacity and ability for staff to deliver. I have probably sounded like a broken down record for a long time now, stressing that staff welfare is critically important. And I'll continue to drive that, and I'll make no excuse for that. And that includes Nathan and Brad and Ian and Morgana. And I am constantly looking after the welfare, and I think something will need to give. Not only is Nathan and his team under pressure from staffing resources, but we also have the added complication of COVID. We had the added input of 3 waters. We have the added input of a whole lot of other things that I could list for the next half an hour, and you will all know what I'm talking about. So I think we all need to be realistic that staff welfare comes absolutely first, and I will not be putting that on the back burner at all.
All right, and that's a very valid point. And if you, second time I visited Bell Island in the last few months, it actually makes me quite proud to go there now to what it did 5 years ago. So the progress that has been made by the staff since we changed the regime has just been tremendous. And we need to thank you for that, because I can remember when during the resource consent that we were told by the commissioners that it looked a bit tired and scruffy. Now, they wouldn't be saying that now. So that's real progress that's happened. And you can see the progress. And again, with the discussions that we had with iwi yesterday, they can see that we are making progress in a certain direction, which I think that's why we get this pushback, and they're happy to engage with us. So we've made a lot of steps forward, but if some things have to be slowed down, because you just look at what's happening, and I sit on a tenders panel with Councillor Tufnell, the people that do this, the sort of work that we want done, are stretched right throughout New Zealand, let alone in the top of the South Island. And if we sit as a tenders panel, if we get 2 or 3 tenders, we're quite happy, aren't we, Councillor Tufnell? And that's just the nature of it. There is an awful lot going on, and we're a high growth area as well, which takes into account all your other things. So we're busy, but we've made considerable progress. And the 3 waters just complicates it on top of COVID. Simple as that. So any other questions at this stage? Or Mr. Wilson?
In relation to the 3 waters issue, does that also complicate recruitment when people aren't really sure, well, what's the future going to be for this position?
Well, I think the engineers around the table, and I've been involved at Tasman, it's very difficult. We're running short of water engineers, as I understand it, project managers and others. It's very hard. And one of the things is government departments are stealing their staff as well, taking them to Wellington and other areas. So it's not just engineering, but it's across the table. Councillor Skinner.
I think a good point raised, just getting an understanding of that, trying to get staffing difficulties without 3 waters. Is there being a move over already? I know people might be anticipating for 2024 if it comes into play, but staff, not staff here, but in regards to 3 waters applications or people looking at positions, is that starting to happen already? Is there shifting of?
Mr. Shaw might be able to comment. I think it's.
I'm not pointing in particular to Nelson, but if it's going to have an impact on us trying to get someone in the future.
Yeah, or Mr. Labutus, either. All I know is that water engineers are very short.
So through the chair, all I can say is that, and I know that Mike and I have discussed this on numerous occasions. Any sort of engineer in the 3 waters is like hen's teeth. They just, first of all, they're not moving, number 1.
Yep.
Number 2, I mean, we've probably gone 12 months. We've advertised 5 times. We just aren't even getting applications. And the house prices in Nelson aren't helping.
Yeah.
And look, it's a status quo. We'll work through the 3 waters. It is what it is, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make. We've got a lot of balls in the air. 3 waters is but one.
Yes, I understand.
And we're trying to do business as usual as well.
Chair, so I understand even without 3 waters, it's always hard with engineers. So, but is central government starting to advertise or putting the feelers out already? Is that what's happening?
I'll let Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. So I believe Taumatarawai have got 48 staff on board already. At this stage, they seem to be targeting enforcement, compliance type people rather than engineers as such. There's a few engineers that I've met because I know they've identified 2 engineers that will be our relationship managers, whatever, for this area, and we get to meet them in a couple of weeks. But that's more the regulatory enforcement type they seem to be targeting. But I think what we need to be aware of, over the next 2.5 years, with the transition, they're going to be coming to council for secondments. And I think it's really important that we are involved in that. So we're part of that decision making. But that means we will likely have some key staff that will be working more with Taumatarawai or the new water entity, I should say, for the transition. And the challenge will be to backfill those roles. But we've just recently advertised an engineering role, and was it was mostly engineering, and we only had 5 applicants. I say only 5. That in the current situation, that is unusual. But most of those are from Australia. Of course, with the borders opening early next year, I think that's going to open a few opportunities, and we're going to get Kiwis coming home as well. So I think there's a bit more of an opportunity coming our way, but who knows, we might actually have others wanting to go the other way as well. So it is a difficult market. Now we're looking at things as well like helping with cadetships and that sort of thing, getting more of the younger locals into the area. We get involved in the high schools, we get involved in the local NMIT with advisory boards, that's all advisory groups and so on. And just trying to encourage more of, because you go to the schools now and very few actually know what civil engineering is.
Yeah, no, cheers, because I know you're working very hard. But just that first comment to Tatarawai, that's the government's arm, that's Three Waters, is it? So they're already, you're saying they're already taking on, they've already got employees.
They've got employees ready. I understood from earlier comments that they're looking eventually when they're fully operational. And of course, it's still 2 years before wastewater and stormwater starts coming under the.
So it's all very predetermined from central government perspective. Okay, thank you.
Nathan, if you've got anything else,
Otherwise
we'll go on to finance.
From NRSBU's perspective, or regional services in particular, I mean, recruitment becomes slightly harder for us as well because, any person that would join us is actually 50% landfill and 50% wastewater. And so the rules from currently coming down, my understanding from the Three Waters reform is that anybody who has 80% water would go with the water company. But if you're 50-50, there's no clarity on what that means for you. So we've got an additional uncertainty around people who might take on our roles because there's no clarity of whether there's a ongoing role post 2024 at the present time.
Yep, that's the nature of our beast. Simple as that. Right, I think if there's no more questions of Nathan, we should go on to finance. And if Andrew's got any comments to make, or people have got questions of him after he's made a couple of comments.
Do you want me to speak, Andrew?
I think the main thing to note in the, I'm just trying to get the report in front of me. Yeah, the main point to make is that the additional costs for consultancy of backfilling the staff, which you've just been discussing the issue, that comes at a premium price. That's probably the main factor that these accounts show. The other one from a council perspective is that the fixed contributions are lower, but the interest rates are lower, which offset that, and that will flow through to the surplus at year end. The increase in the variable income will be used to pay the operational expense, and any excess would go back to the customers as customers.
So what I took from that and what I took from what I read was it balances itself out.
Yeah, and
from our point of view, yeah.
Yeah, currently we're running slightly above budget, so we've got this a surplus running for the year to date. Obviously, the consultancy costs are high, but most other things are, relatively within balance around the budget. So, from my perspective, things are looking fine.
Yeah. So the surplus, what I'm trying to say is the extra surplus will be going back to the customers rather than to the councils, realising, of course, the two councils are the major
Also
customers.
customers, yeah.
Correct. Oh, we've got a customer.
But there is a different basis that it goes back on, different proportions, but in effect, it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
Always the key thing is we don't want any surprises at the end of the year. That's what the customers always ask. Simple as that. Right. So nothing else?
No, I'm good. Any more questions?
Any questions of Andrew from anyone around the table? All right. So have we got someone to move the manager's report? Move Councillor McGurk, seconder. Councillor Tufnell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. I think that concludes us, and then we will a motion to move into yes. So moved Councillor McGurk, seconded Councillor Tufnell. All, turn this thing on. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Now we have to